and welcome back to No More Miserymas. This is a 24-part series that I'm doing in a very vlogmas kind of way to try and cheer you up this weird Christmas time. It's okay if you're not in a good mood. I mostly sometimes aren't either at Christmas. It's a weird time, but I'm just doing some like small versions of my usual series videos to cheer you up. And one question I always get asked when I put out my questions for my Agony Lena series, which is a series where I answer your existential angst questions, is about choosing a career, choosing a job. How should I choose one in light of the current situations of the world? Like, what even is a career goal? And I've been making notes on my phone about this for quite a while because it's something that I am always going through trying to sort out in my head and with my weird career paths. There's a video about that up here. It's always been something that has been chopping and changing in my mind. So I'm going to basically thought dump on you right now about how I feel about this idea of career goals, how to pick a job. And for me, that's really changed during the pandemic as well on a personal level. Like, I changed my job during the pandemic, and also just generally in the way that people have been treated in their jobs during the pandemic. So the first thing I wanted to point out that really gave me pause for thought was this incredible thread that I'm going to link below on Twitter. It's a person who I think works in academia, but so many of her points in the thread were so relevant to the industries that I've worked in and just generally across the board. And one of the points I liked the most that they made was institutions don't love you back. And this made me think as well about when you're younger or when you're a teenager, and the way you express a career goal is you often say like, oh, I want to work for Disney, or I want to work for Penguin Books, which is something that I did. And these big brands that you think represent like a cool thing, that they make a cool thing that you want to be part of making. And they're seen to be at the pinnacle of that industry or that discipline. So we often tie our career goals with working for a certain institution, or maybe that's like Cambridge University or NASA. What we need on a personal level sometimes gets negated by this almost brand affiliation, this fetishization of what we think a brand is and what it represents, and then sacrificing ourselves on the altar of that. And I think that's something that I really feel strongly about as I've gone through my career, is that you don't work for the person that employs you. You don't work for your boss. You work for the person above your boss, above your boss, above your boss, who will probably be an old, inconsiderate man, just statistically, who is a shareholder and is only pushing for profit. Literally the definition of a shareholder. So when I think about like, oh, what career should I choose? The first thing I think about is don't make it around who you want to work for. I also realized I'd made a similar video during my 40 days of videos like 4 years ago, which I'll link here, kind of answering this question, but also answering like a different kind of question. So I gave the example that, you know, I love food, but I'm not really interested in how it's made or who makes it or what the ingredients are. I'm not like a foodie, but I do love food, versus loving books, and I'm actually interested in all the different intricacies of like binding processes, types of paper, ways different industries are funded, that the history of the industry. That's something I'm really interested in. So being able to differentiate between something that you just love, like, and that's okay, that's a pure love, a love to be in the audience, a love to consume, versus something that you're genuinely interested in opening the lid of and like poking your finger into and seeing how it works. They're very different passions, and I think sometimes they can get meshed together in the education and career pruning process, and it's a big root of misunderstanding, I think, when it comes to picking a job or picking an industry to go into. Another point is, if you're like me, who you're making money for does matter. I had jobs in my 20s that I loved the day-to-day. I liked the people that I was working with. I felt like I was okay at the stuff that I was doing. I felt like I had just about too much work, but not like a horrific amount of work. But I realised that I am not one of those people that can get past knowing where the money is going and to what ends those people are using the money for, or at least the systems they're using that money for to keep perpetuating. I really like this quote that I saved from The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which is probably not the most predictable place to go to for career advice, but it had this line in it where it's talking about the main character talking to her dad, the career aspirations he had for himself and what he wishes for his daughter, and he talks about finding work that invigorated him. When you're older, you have to find a job that makes your heart feel big instead of one that makes your heart feel small. Okay, do you promise me that? And it reminded me of this, well, several moments really I had in my career where I was sitting there and my heart felt so small, even though my day-to-day was good. It wasn't ideal, but it was good, but my heart still felt very small and I couldn't really work out why. Now, that is not to say that you have to align with the values of your employer. Sometimes you don't have a choice, and I completely get that. And I think with me, for my channel, there are people that I have worked for that I would never promote, and I see them as completely different moral alignings, if you like. Working for somebody and giving your time in place of somebody else who would do the same kind of job, versus like me as a personal individual promoting them, expanding what they do rather than just fulfilling like a little shelf in the system they already do. Does that make any sense? But when we're talking about your career goal, not realistically where you have to be right now, but surely a career goal is like an ideal situation. We're looking to reach for the moon and land among the stars. You know, if you're thinking about a career goal, I think who you're working for and what they're doing with the money and how they are affecting the larger conversation around what human dignity is, what work is, and what is fair pay for that work. Are we perpetuating capitalism? Are we doing more harm than good? Like, that matters for me. If you're somebody like me, and like that does matter, that does bother me if that isn't in line. Another point in that Twitter thread I was talking about said, if you have a choice between committing to abstract principles or committing to competent people with strong moral values, do the latter. So there are lots of industries or companies that say like, oh, we stand for this, or like, we're here to create freedom and amazing creative opportunities for all. But then in the way they're actually setting up their business and their practices, it doesn't do that. Those words are meaningless. And if you can find an institution or a place to work that is smaller and maybe unexpectedly, somewhere where maybe it's not like an obvious place that is changing the world, or maybe it's in a really obscure industry, but if you find competent people with strong moral values, they're the people to commit to. They're the people to work for, in my opinion. Yeah, some of these brands can say, this is what we stand for. Every brand has a bloody manifesto. But if their corporate structure says the opposite, I personally think, as just somebody who would probably always be working at that lower management level, even if I was ever going to be a manager or a manager's manager, I'd still be on those lower rungs. I'm not going to be the person to change that institution systemically, and therefore if I was given an opportunity to work elsewhere, like I have been, I do. If you do have to work at places you disagree with, which I have, no shame in it. What I would say is that maybe the only one incredibly useful takeaway from all of the many hours I spent in Bible study as a teenager was, don't share your pearls with pigs. Best Bible quote. I think so. Give them what they're asking for, give 100%, but don't give 110%, especially if you work in a creative industry or a creative job. There are always ideas that you have, or contacts that you have, or energy that you have that is completely indispensable, and I have often given that to a company, knowing full well that, and everybody should know this because you should read your employment contract, if you come up with an idea or a concept, or you give on a contact within your employment contract, it is very usual that that company legally owns it. So even if you come up with something and then you want to walk away, you can't take your idea with you. You can't take your value with you. And that's just part of the deal you signed with Ursula. That's how we get our legs and lose our voice. And it's just something that I always knew, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to move away from that and move into self-employed stuff eventually, because I learned the hard way that you have to keep that top extra 10%, that pushing yourself over the edge, that special thing about your ideas and what you believe and what you have to offer. You have to keep that for the people who deserve it. Like me and Ariel said in the video we made earlier in this series about work, I think work really is about dignity, and you have to some extent some control over that dignity, especially when you're in certain jobs. There are ways to hold back parts of yourself and save them or use them in other like sideways ways to create change, and not giving all of yourself and your best ideas and your best resources to a workplace if you disagree with them. In an ideal world, we'd all be able to have jobs that excited us, fulfilled us, and were for people that we agreed with. But in a slightly less ideal world, I would really hope for people that they can either find a job that is meaningful to them or enables them to have a general overall meaningful life. I don't think that your job or your career goal has to be something that 100% aligns with everything you are and like sparks joy every single day. If it enables you to have a fulfilling life by your definition in the other hours of your week, then to me that is a career success, and there's no shame in that. However, when people ask me this career question, I fear that it aligns with a bigger question that is so much harder to answer but is also necessary to ask. What is a worthy use of your life? Oh my God. After all, like I said in other videos, the floor is made of lava. Context matters. You are standing on the floor, and the state of the floor or the planet is vital, essential, core to every other decision that we are able to make. So if you are able to make it, always worth noting, no jobs on a dead planet. But I was listening to this podcast called How to Save a Planet, and they had this really great Venn diagram exercise that I'll link the episode below. But basically the Venn diagram exercise for working out what you can do next was drawing one circle with the resources and skills that you have, another circle filled with things you think need fixing, whether that's in your industry or in the world in general, and then a third circle that's just like, what brings you joy? What do you genuinely like doing? What could you do for an extended period of time without getting burnt out? And seeing what the middle of those three circles looks like. What is the overlap between those three things? That really, really helped me work out what I'm doing long term, but also it relates to tomorrow's video teaser, I know, where I'm going to talk to you about me using this Venn diagram process and working out a project that I'm going to be opening up next year for you guys to join in on. And I think that it's hopefully going to be in some way vaguely helpful meeting of those three things, because it's something I'm always trying to work out as well, especially working in what I guess we're calling the influencer space. It's a really weird space to navigate morally, and it's one that I'm not perfect at and also don't really expect myself to be perfect at, but it is an ongoing moral conundrum that is fascinating to talk about, and I'm excited to chat to you a little bit about it tomorrow. So without further ado, I hope that cleared up some, or maybe even just complicated in a good way, some of your thoughts and feelings about careers and job goals and what that even is. There is a whole series here of ways to cheer you up and get you thinking. That is my version of Vlogmas. I hope you will join in on the No More Misery-mas. There are some more videos about that there. These videos are made possible by the Gumption Club, who tip me per video to make sure these videos keep happening. How sexy of them. The sexiest people in the world. Thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna see you tomorrow. Frog Snug out.